This is the story of how the rhinoceros got his skin. And it happened just so. Long ago, in the high and far-off times, there was an uninhabited island on the shores of the Red Sea. And on this uninhabited island, there lived a Parsee called Parsee. He lived all by himself, with nothing but his hat, his knife, and his cooking stove, of the kind you must particularly never touch. One day he took flour and water and currants and plums and sugar and things and made himself a cake. The Parsee always made cakes for breakfast, dinner, tea and supper. But this was the most superior cake he had ever made. It was 2 feet across and 3 feet thick, and he baked it and baked it and baked it till it was all done golden brown and smelt most sentimental. He was just about to eat it when there came down to the beach from the altogether uninhabited interior a most ill-mannered rhinoceros named Strokes. So called because he breathed through his mouth instead of his nose. He looked very like all rhinoceroses do today, with a horn on his nose and 2 piggy eyes. But his skin fitted him smooth and tight, without a wrinkle or a fold, and he was very proud of it. All the same, he had no manners then, and he has no manners now, and he never will have any manners. Without so much as a good afternoon, he lumbered up to Parsee with his beady piggy eye fixed on that beautiful cake. After greedily gobbling it up, the rhinoceros went back to the altogether uninhabited interior without so much as a thank you very much. Then the Parsee came down from his palm tree, and as the rays of the sun reflected from his hat in more than oriental splendor, he cooked up a magic aimed at that greedy, ill-mannered rhinoceros. And the magic said, "Them that takes cakes which the Parsee man bakes makes dreadful mistakes." And there was to be a great deal of trouble to come from that magic for that ill-mannered, bad-tempered rhinoceros, because there was a heat wave on that uninhabited island on the shores of the Red Sea, and everybody got very, very, very warm. The Parsee took off his hat, but the rhinoceros took off his skin. In those days, it fastened down the front with 3 buttons like a Macintosh. He left his skin under a shady tree and still full of the Parsee's cake, he waddled off down the beach to go for a swim. Presently, Parsee came by, and he found the skin, and he smiled and smiled and smiled, and he rubbed his hands with glee and danced and danced and danced. He danced all the way back to his cooking stove, of the sort you must particularly never touch. And he filled his hat with cake crumbs, for remember, the Parsee never ate anything but cake, and he never ever swept away the crumbs. Then he danced all the way back to the rhinoceros's skin. And he took that skin, and he shook that skin, and he scrubbed that skin, and he rubbed that skin, just as full of old, dry, stale, stickly, tickly cake crumbs and some burned currants as ever it could possibly hold. Then he climbed up to the top of a tree and waited for the rhinoceros to come out of the water and put on his skin. Rhinoceros did. He buttoned it up with the 3 buttons, and it tickled like cake crumbs in bed. Then he scratched a little, but that only made it worse. Then he scratched a lot, but that only made it a lot worse. Then he lay down on the sand and rolled and rolled and rolled, and the cake crumbs tickled him worse and worse and worse. Then he rubbed and rubbed and rubbed against the spiky bark of a palm tree. He rubbed so hard that he rubbed his skin into a great fold over his shoulders, and another fold formed underneath him, where his buttons used to be, for he had rubbed the buttons clean away. And his temper got worse and worse, and his skin got more and more crinkly, for the cake crumbs were trapped inside forever and ever. And my, how they tickled! Then Parsee came down from the palm tree wearing his hat, from which the rays of the sun were reflected in more than oriental splendor. He smiled at the bad-tempered rhinoceros, 'cause he knew his magic had worked, and that it served that grumpy rhinoceros right. And he went back home to make more cakes on his cooking stove, of the kind that you must particularly never touch. And the ill-mannered, bad-tempered, greedy rhinoceros went back to the altogether uninhabited interior, very angry and very scratchy indeed. And ever since that day, every rhinoceros you will ever see, besides those you won't, have great folds of wrinkly, crinkly skin and a very bad temper, exactly like Storks, the first rhinoceros in the world.